So now that we have a space station that was built from geopolitical forces, it's a zero-G laboratory. I'm cool with that. I don't have a problem. In fact, it's been officially designated as a U.S. laboratory, kind of like Berkeley Labs or Los Alamos, Fermi. It has the same kind of designation as the rest of those labs, as a preservation of the capital investment in what the space station represents. So yeah, if you're only doing science, send robots. But there are other reasons to go into space, and once you accept that fact, you don't then invoke the robot test to see whether you actually conduct the exercise.
I sense, Neil, that we're losing our space edge to other countries. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think the one way you can lose it because you lose it, and you can also lose it because they take it from you, right? I mean,
you can lose the race.
Yeah, to the two ways you can end up without it, right? You lose it, or it gets taken from you. And my read of the international landscape is that both are happening simultaneously. We've lost the motivation, and other countries
and the drive, determination, all that
have recognized the motivation for it. So in China, I was part of a presidential commission that looked around the world at the climate of aerospace industries, because our industry was suffering badly. They had lost 500,000 jobs in the previous decades, and there was heavy consolidation, and it worried Congress and the White House because the aerospace industry is responsible for our military security, jet security. It's responsible for our transportation, commercial, and commerce. Humans taking planes, as well as the movement of goods, as well as aviation is also, you need that for so transportation and for goods and services and for military security. If we lose that industry, what does that mean for us? So that I was on a commission to study that. And we went around the world. We got to China. This is now early 2000s. And we see captains of industry and heads of agency, and they all have like rings from engineering schools in America. And they went back to China, and they understood the value of science literacy and science education, and they put that into effect in China. And now China, the mood and atmosphere in China is the mood and atmosphere that prevailed in America here in the 1960s.
Yep, I would agree. Now, what happened, though, with total relationships with other countries as a team? So let's assume right now, accurately so, we've got this economic mess. It's expensive. What's wrong with teaming together with the Europeans and the Chinese and the Russians and get all this stuff done together as a team?
So, yes, it's expensive. But I claim that if you view it as an economic investment, then what matters is your return on that investment. And I've been trying to convince people that the return is huge because it affects the culture of the country that's conducting the exercise. And they invent whole new industries and economies because they continue. It's an innovation culture. Right now we don't have an innovation culture. By the way, Steve Jobs and Michael Dell and Bill Gates, they were all 13, 14, 15 years old when we landed on the moon. And they innovated. They didn't even necessarily innovate in space technology. They just simply innovated. Is it an accident that all three of them are here in America and all three of them are some of the richest people that the world has ever seen? So this is the kind of culture that they grew up in and our children are not growing up in. Now, in terms of international, I'm saying if it's expensive, if I can convince people that it's an investment, you don't need to look for partners unless you just want a higher return on your investment or a bigger investment to get an even bigger return later. If you're doing it as a charity case, or you're doing it because you don't think that we're going to get a return on investment to society, if you're doing it just to do science, then you would collaborate. And science does collaborate. The Hubble Space Telescope is a multinational collaboration, although we are the lion's share of that collaboration, of course. The space station is the International Space Station.
But we put in most of the cash.
We put in most, but there are fundamental parts of that space station. There are whole chunks of it that are entirely funded by other countries.
That's true.
Now, it's modules, they're called. These are the pieces of the space station
that plug right in, right?
One by one in the space shuttle and then assembled. There's an Italian part. There's a Russian part. And so the space station, in fact, is the greatest collaboration of nations outside of the waging of war.
Yeah, I agree. And what would we do if we had a war and we've got all these different races and ethnicities up there in space?
Well, that's an interesting. They addressed that a little bit in the movie 2010, that sequel to 2001, but it really wasn't a sequel. I mean, it was
it wasn't the same.
Two completely different kinds of movies.
Yeah.
In that, they were collaborating with the Russians to investigate the sign of life at Jupiter, and while that's, by the way, this movie was made during the Cold War, the 1980s.
That's right.
Or early 80s. So we're with the Russians, and we're collaborating. We're trying to find out what the life is, and they had a spaceship up there, and so we all go up there, and then there's trouble down on Earth, and there's some movement of troops. I forgot all the details, but it ended up that we ended up pulling our representatives out of the American embassy in Moscow, and they pulled their representatives out, and we're on the brink of war. And so we could not be on their soil, they couldn't be on ours. And so they get the telephone call up at the spacecraft that says, Russian people, go back to your space.
Yeah, separate quarters, right?
Yeah. It's like, what? I'm thinking, I'm saying what because I know it would happen that way, but the absurdity of it was just laid manifest there. They're up there doing interesting scientific research, and now they have to be subject to the political idiocy that's going on Earth. You're right. If it happens, there'd be issues regarding it. Or I'd rather think of it the other way, that with such extensive collaborations, it will prevent the rise of tensions because we're invested so heavily in each other.
As we kick this thing around, are we going to make that stand? Are we going to do it and do the right thing? I mean, because based on what I'm hearing from you, we're not doing the right thing yet.
Somebody has to be convinced, and it's Congress and the general public, that the 1 penny on a dollar is an investment in the future of our economic.
And we have to have that 1 penny?
I say double it because right now I know NASA doesn't have enough money to do everything, and NASA's portfolio has grown over the years.
Yeah.
If you looked at what was expected of it in the 1960s, you're going to the moon, period. All right? After that, it's okay. We're going to build a space station, and we're going to put some weather satellites up there, and
we're going to jump on an asteroid. We're going to do this.
Well, there was just a lot of sort of demands put on it without any corresponding top off of its budget, and so NASA has been sort of over-demanded and underfunded for this.
Neil, I want to ask you about the reliance on satellite technology and what could happen if a nation like China, who knows, decides to start taking them out?
That's an excellent question, and there's so many people who say, "Oh, when we go into space, space should be peaceful place. Should be a peaceful place." And I admire the sentiment there.
Naive,
but I look at the history of human conduct, and here's how it will happen. As you know, the number of satellites that any given country is putting up in space is growing. It's growing. We have more satellites up there than ever before, and other countries want a piece of the action too. So, it is the sovereign right of nations to protect their investments,
right,
and their structures. And so you say to yourself, "I've got billions of dollars in satellites up in space. I want to make sure they're safe against some rogue nation or from some evil people. So now I design space satellite protectors. Is it a laser beam? Is it that would be what's called a targeted energy device, or is it a kinetic device?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to protect all of my satellites, so I have a little network of defense weaponry." Then someone else says, "Hey, I think your defense weaponry is actually going to take out my satellite, so I'm going to now I have to defend mine." So now all these weapons start assembling into space, and so it reminds me of a comic in the New Yorker where two people are facing each other with a bow and arrow, and they're each pulling it harder and harder and harder with the arrow faced at each other's heads. And the caption says, as they both speak simultaneously, "The harder I pull the string, the safer I feel."
Yeah.
So I think space warfare is simply inevitable if we continue to say we want to protect investments. And it just takes one rogue person or someone you don't trust to take a step, and then there it is. It's all-out space warfare.
Yeah.
There are books published on this, by the way.
See, I think before the major countries attack each other, they'll go and attack in space. They'll take out each other's command and control, the satellites.
Yeah, in fact, I mean, that's an excellent point. The more the military depends on space technology, I mean, in fact, the transition between the first Gulf War and the second, by how it was conducted, is huge. The first one barely, the one under
Bush,
thank you, was barely space technology, and then we went back in with Iraq. It was
with the other Bush.
The other, right. Right. So I just said Bush, and it'll correct both times. Right?
Yeah.
So we have heavy military reliance on space technology. It's the way we know where all the soldiers are and the troop movements and so yes, if someone didn't want to just annoy you by knocking out a few of your satellites, if in fact they targeted your military eyes, it's a major issue. And I don't study that as a professional, but I know people who do. And they've got all kinds of scenarios in there, and who attacks first. And by the way, if you destroy a satellite and break it into many pieces, each of those pieces then becomes a dangerous projectile against other satellites.
That's right.
There's a threshold above which you can have so many satellites in orbit that if one of them is destroyed, you can set a chain reaction that destroys every single satellite that's in orbit.
From the one that was destroyed.
From the single one, because the particles then destroy other satellites that then become many, many pieces themselves.
Is it an act of war to take out somebody's satellite?
Of course. Yeah. Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Well, let me put it this way. Someone will interpret it as an act of war, but by all means. By all means. That's how people behave. This is what we do. Just why believe that somehow space is going to be different from how we treat each other here on Earth?
Just don't take out the satellite that controls my radio show.
Or the dish TV.
Or the dish TV. Take out the other one, but don't take out that one.
I got to see American Idol.
Now, will they know what satellite does what thing?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Before they take it out?
I'm pretty sure. There's no reason for me to doubt. So that means you'd have to have stealth satellite technology or satellites that confuse the craft that want to take it out.
That's right.
That's a whole frontier. And I mean, it's remarkable that military folks
or you hack into it. You hack into the computer and screw up the satellite.
Well, interesting you mentioned that, because that's a favorite theme of science fiction films, when we get invaded by more intelligent aliens and they control our own machinery and use it against us, and then we're hosed at that point.
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of science fiction movies, what's your favorite?
Oh, it's by far The Matrix.
A classic.
Oh, yeah. Of course, Matrix 1.
Yeah, always a classic.
Yeah. And I would say, second to that, I really enjoyed Deep Impact. I thought it had good...
that was good.
It had good storytelling. It had good... the physics in it was pretty good. And that came out very close in time to Armageddon, which had no
That was
physics.
another one, yeah. I like the old ones. I like the Time Machine, The Day the Earth Stood Still.
Oh, really? Yeah. It's, okay, I was, I'm a big budget movie goer, right? I like the big budget science fiction films.
And you go to them? You go to the big screen, or do you wait till they come out on DVD?
Well, now I got the oversized flat panel, but yeah, I would try to see them in the theaters if they were big. So, for example, I saw the Star Trek movie in the theater,
and the sound is superb.
Yeah, that's right. And so that one, and another great film was Contact, the Carl Sagan story.
Classic.
Yeah,
that's one of my favorites.
So
too.
well done. And what I especially liked about Contact was the effort they spent to extrapolate, to presume or figure out how humans would react in the face of this discovery. Then you see all these cults come up, and it's an interesting.
But they're right.
It's an interesting study in the causes and effects of human behavior in the face of a scientific discovery.
The Brookings Institute years ago, did a little research in terms of what would happen if extraterrestrial life, was known. And how would we handle it? Would we disclose it? And the bottom line is, no, government's not going to tell us.
Well, except that presumes that the government is the most competent thing out there.
Right.
And that is just false. I got people with really great telescopes in their backyard, and there's nothing that's up there that... So, for example, in Deep Impact, it operated on the premise that a killer asteroid was found and that the government kept it a secret. The sky is open to whatever you want to point the telescope.
Is that the one with Jeff Goldblum?
No, that one was
that was pretty good too.
Independence Day. That was just a fun. My favorite line in Independence Day was when Will Smith finally catches up with the alien in the pod, and he punches him in the face and says, "Welcome to Earth."
Yeah.
And he drags his smelly alien all across the desert.
Or good old Randy Quaid doing what he was doing.
Oh, yeah. So these are fun movies, and I enjoy the big-budget science fiction films. But I would say my top three are The Matrix, then Contact, and Deep Impact.
I don't know later if we should open up the phones and just talk to you about space or also get some great movie reviews from people, huh? But it's good. It's great to let the mind wander. But, here's another question. How could these science fiction films be so far advanced in their day and eventually that technology comes to be? Whether it's Dick Tracy stuff and the little watch, how could they do that? How did they know? The Jetsons. Remember the Jetsons, the TV show?
I think you're thinking about it the wrong way. It's not that they predicted the future. It's that people who came later saw what was predicted and said, I'm going to make that happen.
Yeah.
So the actual writing of the science fiction story, in some cases, triggered the invention later.
The invention.
Right. So it's not that so it was not a prediction. It was
they created
a recipe.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so,
good point.
What's funny is there's some things we see in science fiction films that portray the very distant future that we've already gone through and we're on to the next thing. So, for example, the flip phone, the inventors of the flip phone, surely were watching Star Trek with the tricorder. I mean, not the tricorder.
I still know a guy who's got a little antenna that pulls out. That's old. Neil, we're going to take this break, come back, and want to talk with you about extraterrestrial life out there, what you believe, and then later on next hour, we'll open up the phone lines for the final hour of phone calls. I'm George Norrie as we talk about Space Chronicles on Coast to Coast AM. Next hour, we'll take your phone calls with Neil deGrasse Tyson as we talk about his work, Space Chronicles, but let's get his take on extraterrestrial life. Does he think it exists? We'll be back. Neil, it's a vast universe, and I've always believed that the primordial soup that made this planet is in abundance throughout. There's got to be life out there. What do you think?
Oh, yeah. Well, of course, we haven't found any yet, but no one who's studied the problem denies the extremely high likelihood of it. And those who do deny it, there's usually some other kind of cultural, social, religious agenda within them that prevents them from accepting the evidence. And the evidence is that, first, the universe is large. Vast is a better word.
Extremely.
The universe is old. The ingredients of life and of planets is prevalent across the universe. And life on Earth began almost as quickly as it possibly could have once the conditions cooled to allow the formation of complex molecules. And so you combine all these factors, and you say, well, sure, life could be everywhere. It might even be on Mars or on Europa, places that we know have or once had liquid water coursing through them. So no one who's studied the problem denies that there could be life just in plenty of places. Now, if you use life on Earth as a template, it might not be the best template, but it's the only template we have, so let's just use it for the sake of this conversation. If you put up the timeline of Earth, you'll see that life formed pretty quickly after it formed, life spawned pretty quickly after Earth formed. Then most of Earth's history were just single-celled organisms, up until like 500 million years ago. And so single-celled had an easy time getting made and controlled the Earth. So if you come upon another planet and Earth is your template, chances are you're going to come upon it with single-celled life. it'll excite biologists, but won't excite people who are looking for someone they want to shake hands with.
Okay, let's assume Sagan was correct, that there is life out there. He didn't believe it visited this planet. We've got all kinds of strange stories and mysteries about the possibility of extraterrestrial life coming here. But I take it, Neil, you don't believe that.
Well, it's not a matter of belief. I don't. The word belief is it's not really in my currency, because belief is you have a thought and there's no evidence for it, so therefore you have to believe it, right? Believe that, is there evidence for it, or is there not evidence for it? And if there is evidence for it, what's the quality of that evidence? Is it good evidence or is it bad evidence? Is there a lot of evidence or is there a little evidence? So it's all evidence driven. In science, yes, you can have a belief in science,
but you don't rule it out.
No, I don't rule it out. But I'm saying you can have a belief in science that might drive you to perform an experiment. Right? I think this is true. I don't have any evidence for it, but let me do the experiment. That would be a belief driving what could be a very interesting experiment. I don't have a problem with that. But to assert a knowledge of something when you have the option to either get more data or study the data that you have and say that it works or doesn't, I don't use the word belief. So, of all the sightings and all the things, I can say without hesitation that what people bring forth and assert as evidence that we've been visited simply doesn't satisfy the standards that scientists hold each other to when we're reporting something far less extraordinary than whether we've been visited by intelligent aliens from another planet across the galaxy. So keep finding them. Just keep doing it. I'm not going to stop anybody from finding aliens. But what you got to do when you find them is just bring a dead alien carcass into the middle of Times Square. That'd be just
somewhere,
or better yet, bring them alive. Okay, then we're done with we're good to go. Okay, then you convince all the skeptics and everyone who were sure they were always there all along. They're just continue to be sure, and we move on to the next step. So we need something better than the eyewitness testimony and the fuzzy photos and the film, and so that's my point here. And so I haven't been convinced by what I've seen because it falls below the threshold of what would render something scientifically credible.
What are your thoughts of the multiverse theory now that so many physicists are jumping on board with?
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
It is.
There's
bizarre.
Yeah, it's bizarre, and but it's fun bizarre, right? So the multiverse is, in case people don't know, your readers surely have heard of it, but in case there are a few that happen to tune in, it's the idea that at the beginning, that the Big Bang is a manifestation of one expanding bubble of many that's in the higher dimensional fabric of this multiverse. And the multiverse is spawning universes all the time, each one with a slightly different ensemble of laws of physics within it. And not all laws of physics, not all combinations of laws of physics would enable life as we know it. So we are in the universe among these countless multiverses. We are in the universe where the laws of physics allow life to form, because we are life and we are then posing these questions about the universe. So Carl Sagan once argued, I think interestingly and philosophically and poetically, that life is a way for a universe to know itself.
How true. If an asteroid were headed this way, and we had
you don't even need the word "if" there.
Okay, we know one day. Would governments tell us?
Don't know about it yet.
Would governments tell us, look, it's coming this way, we're going to get hit?
I'm saying the governments are irrelevant here.
How come?
First, they don't have the best people, but even if they did, they can't put a lock on things that you can find in the night sky.
That's right.
The night sky is completely open.
An amateur astronomer probably would be the one to find it anyway.
And in fact, amateur astronomers, for relatively little money today, have powerful CCD cameras that are connected to the internet. So that you can't hide and they have software to calculate the orbits of these asteroids. So the government can't hide that. It's not a hideable thing, and that's why the movies that portray it. I mean, I accept the fact that in Deep Impact, the government kept it a secret. I accept it because they couldn't have made the movie.
Was that with Morgan Freeman?
Yes, that's the one.
That's the
best
one.
president ever.
Great actor.
Best president in a movie ever. There ought to be an award for best president. And he was dignified and he was serious,
yeah.
but he was compassionate and he was strong in the face of disaster. All the things you want in a leader, he showed.
I met him a few months ago out here.
Oh, yeah, he's
super
a great
guy. Yeah,
great guy. In fact, I have a radio show that's it's an experiment in bringing science to the public called Star Talk Radio, where I'm the host, the scientist, and my guests are not scientists. They're like people hewn from pop culture, and he was one of my guests.
Oh, that's great.
Then people from we explore how science has influenced their livelihood and their interest in their lives. And so it's a way to sort of flip the tables on how we've come to learn what role science plays in society.
That's super. Okay, but an asteroid, it's coming this way. Is government going to tell us? But you think the amateur astronomer is going to see it, probably, and get it out.
Discovers it.
I mean, if an amateur just came to me and said, "Look, here's this picture. This thing's coming our way. It's going to hit us in 2 years." I guess I would go to someone like you first, Neil, and say, "Is this true?"
Yes, so here's what happens, and we have a system for this, by the way. So an amateur discovers an asteroid, and you need images from multiple days so that you know that the thing is moving, all right? They don't move fast enough in a short amount of time for a single picture to capture it. So you need a couple of photos over across time or a very long exposure to show that this is moving and the stars in the background are not. Then you take that information, you do your best to calculate an orbit from it. There's software to enable this. Then you say, this is going to hit Earth. You then submit this information to there's a bureau of what in the old days was called the telegrams, where spontaneous discoveries of exploding stars, of asteroids, of comets, all go to this one clearinghouse. And then the orbit is verified at that clearinghouse. And then they publish it, and then the whole world knows about it within hours, and nowadays probably within minutes. And then you get the coordinates of this and its direction and the orbit. Now you double check it, and you're in Hawaii, you're in Australia, you're in Russia, and so the whole world participates in the unfolding of this discovery.
That's exciting.
And what's also interesting is that look in the catalogs of comets. This ought to really tell you something. Look, their catalogs, Wiki Comet, right? And there'll be like major comets. Look at the names of the comets. Many of them have double names. You say, well, how did that happen? Because you get to name a comet if you discover it.
If you find it.
Yeah,
that's right.
You name it after yourself or your loved one, but usually it's after the discoverer. You know what the double names are?
What?
Two people discovered it at the same time.
At the same time.
But from different parts of the world.
And turned it in.
Yeah, and so what that tells you is we got people monitoring the sky.
Is that like Shoemaker-Levy with the comet?
Well, no, in that case, they were a team.
They were a team.
That's
okay.
right. That's right. But for example, Hale-Bopp, those are two completely different people. Discovered the comet on the same day. And they're both amateur astronomers. They got good, badass telescopes in their backyard. And there you have it.
That's exciting. SETI, what do you think about that? Search for extraterrestrial intelligence.
I think
waste of money?
A little more. We should agree as to what the right percentage is to spend on SETI, and SETI should get that money every year. And I don't know what that is. Is it 1% or 2%? Not too much.
They're not getting a lot of money.
They're not getting a lot. And I don't want to spend too much on it, but I don't want to spend nothing because it's very high return.
So you would keep the program going?
Oh, I would most certainly keep the program, but proportionate. Like I said, there's science where we have real expectation of discoveries within the spending of the money, and SETI is really a shot in the dark. It's the long shot on the racetrack, but if it pays off really big. So there ought to be some percent, and I don't know what they're getting now, but I would guarantee a few percent monies of the total astro science budget every year just to do SETI.
Yeah, I would think so.
And SETI, again, to your listeners, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, which today is done by many different ways. Historically, that is in the last previous decades, it was done with radio signals where we would point our telescopes to the sky and see if someone was trying to send radio signals to us with some message within it. And then people figured, well, there are other ways to do this. You can use optical light as opposed to radio light. and on the premise that they'd be beaming a very intense laser in our direction, or some other kind of focused visible light. And so now there's optical SETI, it's called OSETI, and there's radio SETI, which is the traditional SETI. My big concern is we're listening and not really sending signals. So that if
Stephen Hawking doesn't want us to send signals. He's afraid they're going to come get us. They're going to eat us.
He thinks the aliens will be just like us.
He may be right. You would think that if they achieve that kind of longevity and knowledge, that they would be different. But I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either. And I think if, again, we only have one example of what we call intelligent creatures, and that's humans. And anytime one more advanced civilization comes upon another in the history of exploration of the Earth, it was bad for the other civilization.
Let's just talk about the Bible just a little bit right now when they talk about, fallen angels coming down to breed with the daughters of men. I mean, to me, that sounds like a classic case of, UFOs coming down here doing all kinds of hanky-panky.
Yeah, I mean, but we haven't seen them in the era of scientific methods and tools. I mean, it'd be interesting if other than headlines in the National Enquirer, I don't know any case where someone birthed an alien. I just don't know. Now, what may be the case? Have you seen the full medical journals or books of birth defects?
No, I have not.
It's extraordinary. I mean, there's all manner of things can happen to the fetus, where the heart is outside the body.
I've heard of that. As a matter of fact, there's a little boy who just had an operation. He had a heart outside the body, and they said the mortality rate there was huge.
Huge.
But this little guy's making it.
He's making excellent. So that shows good progress.
Yep.
And so you look at the deformities, and so I can imagine a day where you'd give birth to a severely deformed infant and wonder whether something had influenced you, right?
Right.
Is this an alien, some other kind of creature? That could be the source of no end of mythology in the history of culture.
That's true. Do you think there could be an island of Dr. Moreau somewhere on this planet where some scientist or country might be experimenting genetically with all kinds of things?
I think we're long past the era where you can just hide a population on the Earth. Everybody is traveling everywhere all the time. And so I just don't see...
You don't think it's there?
I don't see that happening with nobody knowing about it. Who is it that said...
I mean, well, for example, we know about Area 51, but do we really know what's going on there?
No, not really. And there are, and there are probably other places where you don't know what's going on either. However, just because you don't know what's going on there doesn't mean what's going on there is extraordinary. So, for example, does the government keep secrets? Of course they keep secrets, okay?
Yeah.
Now, most of the secrets are really uninteresting to most people. So there's no urge to want to tell somebody else. Was it Mark Twain or the author Roald Dahl? One of these sort of clever, sort of satirist authors once said the only way to keep a secret between two people is if one of them is dead.
Yeah,
right?
I believe that.
Okay, and look at how much we knew about President Clinton's genitals. If there were a state secret to be kept, it would have been that. Okay, you would say
there are no secrets.
So I don't. People.
Did you hear the old boardroom theory?
What's that?
Chairman of the board calls in his directors, 6 directors, and said, "Look, this is top secret. We're selling the company tomorrow morning. You cannot tell anyone until the documents are signed. Then we'll send out a press release." And all the directors said, "Of course, confidential." But every board of director has a confidant.
Yep.
So they tell that person.
Yep.
That confidant has his own confidant.
Yep.
And by the end of the day, everybody in the company knew it was going to be sold the next day.
And they knew that they shouldn't tell anyone about it.
Exactly. There are no secrets.
This, but don't tell anyone else.
There aren't. What would you, if you had that one question that you wanted answered about what you do, what would that question be?
You mean about the universe?
About anything like that, yeah.
Well, if I had a question, it would be, of intelligent aliens, and I would ask them, how do they understand the universe? What do they understand the universe to be, and how it works? And I compare their notes with ours.
That's great. I see, and I would even ask them, do you believe in God?
Oh, sure.
To see what they said, because that's part of that.
That'd be an interesting question. I think
it's like the movie Contact, though.
But you can broaden that question and say, do you believe in things in the absence of evidence? Right? Material evidence. That's a more general statement about
a little faith-based there.
Yeah, exactly. How their brain might be wired, and that'd be an interesting probe. I'm just thinking if they got here, they have really high science and technology, and so I'd be distracted by wondering how the hell they did it.
Do you think one day they'll be able to bend space-time? We'll be able to bend space-time to travel?
There's no law of physics to prevent us from doing that. But, we're still running away from tornadoes and hurricanes on Earth, and running away from volcanoes. To say, let us wield the energy density necessary to warp space, that's really wishful thinking given the current state of of our engineering. It's an engineering problem. It's not a physics problem.
That's right. All right, so you're the director of the Hayden Planetarium. You love that job. How long are you going to do that? What's next for you, Neil?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Many people think of jobs as something you do and then you go on to something else. But as director of the planetarium, first I oversaw the construction of the Rose Center for Earth and Space.
Right.
That was fun, and it was great, and we got to rethink how to bring the universe to the public on many levels. And so that's a sort of a baptism in education, especially since there are millions of people who come through those corridors each year. So it's a huge and awesome, I would say, responsibility to get that right.
So you're going to stay there.
But so there's that, and now what's my latitude? Well, so there's a research program. There's a I host special events. There's one coming up.
You've got a TV show coming out?
Right, exactly. There's the Cosmos reboot. The date has been shifting because we're delayed in our scripting of the episodes.
Yeah, well, that happens.
It might be the fall of 2013 or the spring of 2014, but that's in progress. I'm writing books, and so as long as I'm doing things that are fun, the title is just it's a title.
Just hang in there.
Just hang in there.
We're going to come back and take phone calls. Last hour to go with you. Very fast night. It's going as fast as a rocket ship. Okay, this is the hour we take your phone calls. So Neil deGrasse Tyson standing by, and we'll come right back to you in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Neil, do you expect a change with this administration towards space?
A change depends what you mean by change. I mean, he did change things. He said we're not going to the moon, so that's a change. I didn't view that as a positive change. Although, as I said earlier in this broadcast, I was at the speech, and when he said, let's skip the moon, we've been there already, been there, done that, let other people go to the moon. It sounded really forward-thinking until I sort of thought about the full-up repercussions of it. I think what needs to happen is that the American public needs to compel our leaders to make the changes that would reinvigorate our space ambitions.
That's right.
And thereby reinvigorate the culture and, consequently, the economy.
Do we know if the moon might be just chocked full of gold and diamonds? I don't know if it's got any carbon up there or not.
Well, the moon has very little iron for an object that size, and that's what led to the impact theory for its formation, where the Earth in its early solar system...
It's a chunk of us, right?
It gets sideswiped by a Mars-sized, what we call planetesimal, a planet not quite fully formed. But if you get sideswiped, then you scoop up the surface material after the heavy material had already gone to the bottom. So Earth had already formed, and the heavy iron, most of which sank to the bottom. The lighter stuff floats to the top. If you sideswipe Earth, you're going to make a whole other ball out of our crust, and our crust has relatively little iron in it. So the big carrot on the moon is helium-3, which gets deposited into the lunar surface. But helium-3 is a helium atom that's missing a neutron. So it's two electrons, one, and you're counting the number of nucleons in the middle.
And there's lots of it there.
There's lots of it there. And it turns out helium-3 is really useful in nuclear fusion reactors. And it could render nuclear fusion to be a much simpler and efficient process. The problem is we don't yet even have a nuclear fusion reactor. I mean, it's wishful thinking, and good to know it's there for us, but to start harvesting it when we still can't even contain. By the way, we can undergo nuclear fusion on Earth. They're called bombs.
Yeah, exactly.
So they're H bombs, is what that is. So it's not likely that there are deposits of the heavy precious metals that we find here on Earth, not large deposits of it. And about diamonds, diamond needs temperature and pressure and time.
And carbon.
And pure carbon, that's right. And there's surely carbon on the moon, but I don't know that it's getting the pressure and the temperature. So I wouldn't rule it out.
How about gold?
Gold, again, that's one of the precious heavy metals that would have not been...
So that would have gone down
It would have gone down to the center of our Earth. What you really want is to dig a tunnel to the center of our Earth. Every heavy metal is hanging out down there. That's why metallic asteroids would be great mining prospects, because what metallic asteroids are planetesimals where the heavy stuff fell to the middle, and then they got hit again and broke into smithereens. So if you bust up a mini planet after it had already separated its ingredients, you're going to have metallic asteroids representing the core and rocky asteroids representing the mantle and the crust. And so that would be your mix of asteroid properties and varieties orbiting the sun.
The lacrosse campaign, remember when they blasted a little piece of the moon?
Oh, the L-Cross, right.
That kicked up a little percent of gold.
Yeah, so that was a fun mission where you dropped a projectile into a darkened crater near the pole and get your cameras ready to watch the plume rise up above the crater rim and be imaged against sunlight. I mean, it was a very carefully conceived mission to take full advantage of our ability to spectrally analyze the plume of this projectile. And that would tell us what was in the bottom of the craters of the moon, of the polar craters. So, when you have very sensitive spectroscopy, you can find all manner of things. But what matters is it there in large enough quantities to be technologically useful or engineeringly useful.
What do you think of the work of Dr. Paul Davies?
He's an intrepid guy. I mean, he gets around. He has some scientifically controversial ideas, but he's a good educator and a great physicist, and so I think he's now. I haven't checked him lately, but I think he's trying to go a little on the edge. Is that right? What's the latest that you've heard of him?
Well, the latest I've heard is that he has published a scientific paper that we should go to the moon to look for alien artifacts.
Well, in fact, not only alien artifacts, we should go to the moon to look for Earth artifacts. If Earth gets hit by an asteroid, and it can cast, if we know that you can do the simulation on a computer, so we know this can happen, that it will cast pieces of the Earth back into space, some of which would land on the moon.
That's right.
So the good thing about a rock on the moon that came from Earth is that if that left Earth and that rock happened to have fossils in it, then you could have really old fossils of life from Earth sitting unperturbed for billions of years
on the moon.
That's right. And so, I mean, if you're going to look for fossils, I don't know why you would expect alien fossils there, but you'd certainly expect Earth fossils.
That could be pretty dramatic. Of course, I'd love to think of the old school that maybe we visited the moon millions of years ago.
That's an interesting question. I seem to remember a science fiction story that imagined a whole other civilized era that went away, and then we had to sort of rise up again from the cave.
Exactly.
That's an interesting point of view, especially.
I can't rule that out.
I'm not going to rule it out either, but since humans can communicate with each other, that's one of the things that strongly distinguish us from other animals on Earth. I find it hard to imagine that you would have a huge civilization that made great advances, and that was not communicated to others who then did not go extinct.
And there's no record.
Yeah, no record at all. Now, of course, Pompeii was completely lost.
Right.
Until, what was the year?
Until we dug it out.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, it was accidentally discovered, and then we said, oh my gosh, here's the lost city of Pompeii. So it's possible to lose things, for sure, but we knew Pompeii existed as a city in the Roman Empire, right?
Well, in India, in ancient texts there, they talk about flying machines, Vimanas, And even Robert Oppenheimer, when he helped develop the bomb, cited texts from Indian Sanskrit that talked about what could have been construed as a nuclear explosion.
Now, what's interesting is when you look at these old writings of any culture, we're predisposed to, in modern times, because we have a modern sensibility about what exists and what doesn't exist, right? We have technologies, and so we take that sensibility and we read these ancient texts, and what tends to happen is you go and pick out the things that you can interpret from your modern point of view.
True.
So you see this thing, hey, that looks like a mushroom cloud, or that looks like a
helicopter,
a helicopter, or a helmet, right? An astronaut helmet, because you already know what these things look like today. But 100 years ago, if you went back and looked at those same documents, how would you interpret it then, right?
Yeah.
You wouldn't interpret it as an astronaut helmet because we didn't have astronauts. You wouldn't interpret it as a bomb because we didn't have bombs that size. You'd interpret it as something else. So I imagine going back at 100-year increments and collecting all the things we think it was in the absence of all the technology we have today. And so that, with that exercise, it's kind of a mental exercise to do that. I don't then put that much credence or disproportionate credence in what I think it is versus what someone 100 years might have thought it was.
You've got to look at an old Egyptian tablet from Abydos. I'd be curious one day to find out what you think of it, Neil. It truly looks like a boat, a helicopter. There's no question the shapes are the same. Mm-hmm. And it was done thousands of years ago.
Sure, and then you can ask, though, how about all the things that you don't interpret as something modern, mm-hmm. right? What are you doing with that information? I mean, one of the most important things you can do as a scientist or as someone, if you're scientifically literate, is to assess all the other possibilities that are there and then put your interpretation in context. So if there's so many drawings of so many things that that mean nothing to you, and then you find the one that does mean something to you, you ask, is that significant? Or is this just some of this random kind of scribbles that it was random to us? It surely wasn't random to the culture. But these scribbles, and who knows, it can still be a mystery what it is. But just because it's a mystery doesn't mean they were visited by intelligent aliens with helmets.
True.
Or it doesn't require that that's true just because you don't know for sure what it is. So the context of what it is they're describing, I think, matters. And when you read all these books about cool stuff in cave drawings and all of this, they don't tend to dwell on all the things that just look absurd or don't make any sense at all. And I want to see the full package of everything they're drawing. And if it's 1 in 1,000 that you've picked out, then you've selected it. You've pick something else out. Make sense of that. Oh, I can't. Okay, so why overinterpret the one when you can't even interpret the rest?
Yeah,
that's kind of how I look at it.
But look at the ABYDOS. Just go to like Google Images, put in Abydos, ABYDOS, and take a look at that thing, whatever it is.
What culture is this? This is
it's Egypt.
Egypt, okay.
And it's part of it's in a stone that's been chiseled away. Mm-hmm. It's really weird, but I got to get your take on it.
Okay.
All right. Let's go to the phones. Let's go to Darius in Toronto, Canada, to get us going on the Skype line. Go ahead, Darius.
Hi. Thank you very much for taking my call.
Sure thing.
I would like to ask Neil about whether you've heard of the Black Knight satellite that preceded Sputnik and has this polar orbit around our planet, and whether you knew anything about it. I'll take my...
The Black Knight satellite. I have not.
No, I don't know anything about it. Who's launched by whom?
He's gone. Nobody knows, I guess. Maybe it's an ET.
No, I don't know anything about it.
I'll check it out.
And depending on its altitude, there's no way it would still be orbiting now. The atmosphere has its way of cleaning out moving objects through it. I mean, there's the satellites that remain in low Earth orbit.
All right, here it is. Let me read it. Ready?
Okay, go.
It says, the Black Knight satellite, a mysterious satellite of unknown origin discovered in 1960, which shadowed Sputnik. It is believed to have been of extra...
Shadowed Sputnik?
Shadowed Sputnik.
I don't know. What does that phrase mean?
Followed.
Okay, so it came after, not before it. Fine.
Right.
Okay.
It is believed to have been of extraterrestrial origin, signaled back old radio waves from the 20s and 30s before it disappeared. In short, the wave patterns were analyzed by an astronomer, Duncan Lunnan, revealing the origin as Epsilon Botis. It's a star system. That's interesting. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, so
who knows that they'd come from there? That's
everything we know about space exploration tells us that Sputnik was the first satellite. So just to clarify that. Now, for this, it's a mystery. I mean,
I've heard of this before. I didn't hear of the name of it. Like,
what's useful is if more than one person drew the same conclusion that this fellow Lundgren did. In science, the truth is not established by any individual. It's established by the repeated exercise of someone who's skeptical, someone who wants it to be true, someone who's skeptical of it, someone who's indifferent by it, someone who has a different tactic to measure it, someone who has a different tool they just invented. And if you have consistency among all of those analyses, then you can start to assess it to be an actual truth of the world or of the universe. So I don't know what he means that it's tracked something to the star in Bootes. I don't know what that means. If it's orbiting the Earth, what does it mean it's tracking something to the star?
And now it's gone.
Yeah. So there you have it.
There you go. Okay, back to the phones. Let's go to Carlsbad, California. Frank's turn. Go ahead, Frank.
Hi, great show. First of all, on the Russian moon rocket program that you mentioned earlier that you didn't, there actually was a Russian program, and the trouble was their huge Saturn-like booster blew up on the pad. We found that out during the Glasnost era, that they actually did have a manned moon rocket program, and they just didn't develop the rocket. It kept blowing up. And the last time it blew up, it actually took out a bunch of officials. It blew up right on the pad.
Always a bad thing to take.
Yeah, it sure was. I have a question on the booster rockets that we could develop. We have Atlas and Delta, the updated versions that are more powerful than the originals, and even the Saturn I, which was a very successful rocket. Why not, before we develop new rockets, just go back to those and use those as an interim booster system? And then also, one final thing, and I'll listen to your answer off the air. Could every black hole, or at least larger black hole, end in a big bang or a white hole? So I'd like to get your answer to that. Thank you.
Okay, people
sure.
think. Go ahead.
Two very different questions. So in the first case, the Atlas and Delta rockets are very successful rockets in the arsenal of the American space program, and they launch satellites. They're not what they call man-rated at the moment, and so that requires a whole other layer of technologies and safety parameters fulfilled before they could be brought to bear on launching humans. So, but even doing so, yes, that would get you to low Earth orbit, because that's what they're designed to do, given a certain weight of craft. What we really want to do is not only get to low Earth orbit, but go beyond. And so this new architecture is designed to do all of that, to be scalable to then do all of that. So that's that. But the Atlas and Delta, they're great rockets. And, of course, you have SpaceX. There's the Falcon. This is the efforts of, what's the fellow's name again? Elon Musk.
Yeah.
And he's the billionaire who
Good guy.
wrote PayPal. And I guess he sold it to Amazon, was it? For $1 gazillion.
He made some money.
Yeah. Right. And he loves space. It's great to have rich people who like space, because then they can do fun.
That's right. That's like Robert Bigelow. He's doing his thing.
Exactly. Isn't that funny that they're attracted to space and not some other thing? These are people who are trying to relive an era.
Richard
Branson, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. So to make a fresh architecture for this, I think that's the right decision. My concern is that it's not happening fast enough, right? I don't want to wait till the 2030s. I don't even know if I'll be alive, right? So now about black holes, there's an interesting thing. Hawking radiation, which you might know about, is the evaporation of a black hole, where the energy of the gravitational field around a black hole is so high that it spawns particles. like the E equals mc squared. The E, in this case, is the energy of the gravity, and it takes some of that energy away and spontaneously creates particles. Stephen Hawking discovered this, hence Hawking radiation. But what he noted was that as the black hole evaporates, it evaporates faster and faster and faster. And the very last gasp of a black hole is a gamma ray explosion. Now, it's not a Big Bang, but it's interesting to think that the rate at which this thing begins to evaporate accelerates. And it accelerates exponentially, so that the very last few seconds, it evaporates so violently that the only way you can interpret it is as an explosion. Now, in a rotating black hole, it turns out there's a space-time solution into it, where if you go into a rotating black hole and you dive down through the event horizon, you will see the entire universe that you just came from unfold in front of you, okay? And because your times shift, you live slowly, the universe goes quickly. So you watch the whole universe evolve and die. And in the process, another universe opens up in front of you. And if you can survive the gravity stress on your body, in principle, you can birth yourself into another universe on the other side, but it's not clear whether you would call that a Big Bang.
Popping out like bubbles almost. Let's come back in a moment. We'll take final phone calls with Neil deGrasse Tyson, author of Space Chronicles. We'll be right back. On our next Coast to Coast program, we're going to dive into just about everything for a couple hours with an incredible story of psychic energy, power, why do things happen the way they do. And then, of course, we'll have those Friday night into Saturday morning open lines. And when we come back in just a moment, guess what? That's right. We'll take your final phone calls with Neil deGrasse Tyson, Space Chronicles on Coast to Coast AM. Well, first up, let's go to Mark in Buffalo, New York, east of the Rockies. Mark, go ahead. You're on with Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Hi, George. Fly Navy.
Hey, love it.
I was an SSN officer in the 80s.
Super.
And my dad worked SDI at the Space Center, at Kennedy Space Center on Brevard County, Florida. Now, here's some quick information for you. You said Epsilon Boötes.
Mm-hmm.
That, the proper name, the star is called IZAR. It's a multiple system, 150 light years away, and it's KO2, which means it's an orange bright giant. That means that star is in an advanced stage. So I wanted to throw that out because you guys were talking about Epsilon Boötes.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for that. Mm-hmm.
No, I just wanted to update that with you. I'm an astronomer.
I love it.
One thing that I have a disagreement with your guest is that he was touting Obama's speech and how great it was and everything. All I can tell you is that there's no manned flight awareness. We haven't launched an American out of the North American continent after Obama got in, and he put a lot of people out of work at the Space Center. There were guys that had mortgages, kids in college. He put a lot of people out of work. Okay,
yeah, I said all that.
I'll tell you what the plan is. The plan is to go to Mars. And you know why we need to go to Mars? Because it's there. Okay? We have the technology. We have the financial resources. I mean, this guy spends like a drunken sailor anyway. Let's go to Mars.
The drunken sailors never really start with much money, actually. No, but I was candid about the consequence of him saying we're not going to go to the moon. I said it cost thousands of jobs. That was a very important dimension of my recounting of that speech. When I said it was a great speech, what I mean was the people in the audience listening to him deliver it, it was a very forward-looking, dreamy speech about our future in space. And then the consequence of it is that we lose all these jobs, and we don't do it for decades. And so that was a great disappointment on reflecting back on the consequence of that plan. So I was no less critical of it as you are in this phone call. We should go to Mars because it's there for sure. That's what got us out of the cave to begin with. But going out of the cave didn't cost anybody any money. Going to Mars cost money. And my analysis of the history of conduct of nations, and it's all detailed in the book, by the way. The book got a nice review from the Library Journal, so it should be in libraries in case people don't want to buy it. It should still be available to access. And my read of history tells me that the people who write the checks are not motivated by it's there. They're motivated by the power that they want to maintain or gain. And so the discussion has to be folded into that a geopolitical context to decide what actually gets done and what doesn't.
Wouldn't it be great if one day we get a news conference and they talk about a resurrected program to do these incredible things, and it's based on your story, your book? That would be great.
That would be kind of interesting. I mean, I did a lot of work on this to see what has motivated people, and that's the word of the day, the word of the evening, motivated people in the past, and on the hope or expectation that similar motivations would, in the present day, would get us to achieve similarly grand goals. So that's the goal, and I think the recipe is in there.
Let's go to Goldsboro, North Carolina. Jeff, it's your turn. Go ahead, Jeff. Good morning.
Hi, George. Hi, Neil. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure thing.
Neil, I have 3 questions. One is your Novo Science Now show. Are you still doing those shows?
Thank you. I'm on hiatus from that right now so that I can work on Cosmos, and they're waiting for that to finish, and then we talk about me going back to it, or not, but I'm on hiatus, and so I'm still on their radar, and they're still on mine.
Okay, I love those shows, so I hope you keep doing it.
Thanks for that support. We try to be innovative and make science really fun, but still not compromise the depth of what the meaning of the science is.
Okay. When Newt Gingrich proposed a moon colony, he was universally ridiculed by people on the left, people on the right, people in Republicans, people in Democrats. So I'd like to know what your take is on kind of the environment of even going back to the moon. And my third question is, what benefit or use do you think we'll get out of the International Space Station? The best product or the best use out of the ISS? And should we fund that past 2020?
Okay, these are excellent questions. So the Gingrich was quite the brunt of ridicule when he gave his "Let's go to the moon" speech in Space Coast, Florida, which is the region where Kennedy Space Center and Cape Canaveral are found. And you're right. Actually, the liberal press criticized it as just being crazy. The conservative press that are pro-Gingrich cited it as being visionary. And then the conservative press that supported his opponent, Republican candidates, also said it was kooky. So the only supporters of him were his supporters who were Republican. My view of it is it's not as visionary as Kennedy saying, "Let's go to the moon," when we hadn't yet created a vehicle that didn't kill you upon being launched. So to people say it's too visionary, no, it's not. It's less, because he's saying, let's put a moon colony, yet we've already been to the moon. So to start from the position where we've already been to the moon and then have a moon colony in 8 years, that's not crazy. We did something more crazy than that in 1961. What he believes is the motivation that will enable it, my read of that is that it's flawed. He thinks you can just convince some entrepreneurs that this is just the cool thing to do, that they'll all gather around to do it. And you need a more thought-out driver to make that happen than anything that he was thinking about or that he has considered. And I spent whole chapters in this book on describing how to make that happen without appealing to the failed efforts of the past. When people say, it is our destiny, it's in our DNA, it's our nation's calling, it's the charisma of the leaders, none of those reasons are ever why we went into space. And so I didn't have a problem with it, and neither did others who had considered the value of space exploration. And so when I did that, I did that publicly. The liberal press said that I shot down his moon proposal, and the conservative press said that I sympathized with his moon proposal, which meant I landed exactly in the middle.
Do you think there's going to be some event out there, Neil, where government will make a news conference and say, we have to go, we think there could be life there?
Life would be an extraordinary driver to motivate the exploration of another planet. And if we're going to find life, it's likely going to be Mars and not Venus or somewhere else. So I can imagine such an announcement. That'd be great. That'd be a great day. And is that enough to send people? I don't know, because
it depends on what the announcement is, I guess.
It depends on what the announcement is. If it's aliens waving to us, yeah.
Or there's huts there or something.
We'll send the Marines probably first, because that's how humans react to such forces. But the gentleman's third question about the space station, it's a zero-G laboratory. And so you can imagine all manner of experiments you might do to either or commercial.
Pretty expensive, Neil.
Oh, of course it's expensive. Yeah. But the space station was not built to do science. It was built as a geopolitical maneuver to counter what the Russians were doing in the 1980s with their
Mir,
plans for their space stations.
Yeah.
And then once you built it, then you sort of back into science excuses for why you have it. So of course it's expensive, but they don't. But it's an investment that's already there, and since it's already there, might as well do some good science.
Let's go to the Hawaiian Islands, Maui. Tommy, welcome to the show. Hi, Tommy.
Greetings, George. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Two questions, Neil. You seem very intelligent. You just mentioned a few minutes ago that you believe that when a bunch of scientists come together, they agree on something, then you can accept it as truth. Why is it if 500 people that work for the government, work for high people and high power, plus thousands of other people that actually have contact with a UFO, saw a UFO, or been abducted, that it's not real? For you to say that there's we have never been visited by an alien?
No, I never said we were never visited by aliens. I said that the evidence put forth that we've been visited by aliens is not sufficient to convince the standards of evidence for what is typical in a scientific circle. So you just need better evidence. And so and plus I said that it's not whether scientists believe that something is true, therefore it's true. It's that when different scientists conduct an experiment, and the experiments are consistent every time they do it, even by naysayers as well as different designs and the like, then a truth emerges out of that. And so it's not a matter of what the scientists believe, it's what the evidence of experiments show.
Neil, where are these new scientists coming from? Are they coming from American universities? Are they being born in this country, or are they coming from foreign lands?
Oh, here's one of my great concerns is that going back to the 80s, the graduate departments in the sciences and engineering in America were rising through 50% foreign nationals, and that was India, China, and Taiwan, and also Europe, Eastern Europe in particular. Those students stayed. These were some of the best students in their hometowns and in their home countries. They would come and they would stay because we had great opportunities for them here. And by the way, that's not a weird concept, all right? Since the beginning of immigration, we greatly valued people who can contribute to our culture and the intellectual strength of our enterprise. In these later years, post-2001 primarily, where we have this sort of xenophobia about foreigners, this isn't the case. And here's something that Gingrich says that isn't retold much, but most people would agree, that what he wants to do is, if someone from another country comes to America and gets a PhD in engineering or science, you hand them the diploma and you hand them a green card right as they walk off the stage.
And don't let them get away.
Don't let them get away, and then they'll want to stay. Problem is, our economy is completely stagnated. And so where are there opportunities for them?
Well, that's true.
It's back where they came from. China's economy is growing 10, 12, 11, 12%.
What has become of all these workers and engineers who have been laid off from the shuttle program?
I don't know what the latest is on them. Now, many of those that were laid off were from the NASA contractors, because a NASA employee is a government employee.
Sure, but I'm sure they got laid off.
Well, no, you can't just lay off a government employee. They get reassigned and things where you get early retirement.
So they're working at the post office.
So the real cost here is the contractors working for the corporate partners of NASA, so Lockheed Martin and Boeing and Grumman and this sort of thing. And so, yeah, but nonetheless, it's someone who now can't pay their mortgage. By the way, Florida has one of the highest rates of foreclosures.
That's right.
In the country.
That in Nevada.
Oh, I didn't know that about Nevada.
Oh, Nevada's huge.
That's interesting.
Next up, Sun Valley, California. It is Henry's turn on Coast to Coast. Go ahead, Henry.
The show is great. Its eccentricity is greater than one. It's going places. You know what I mean?
Very nice. Hyperbolic orbit. I love it.
All right. Now, I have a question for you. I was former Air Force satellite wideband and telemetry communications. 2007, they started blowing up things up in space. I remember I was at Detachment 1, Georgia. I was shaken cold. DARPA is working on something called the Phoenix program in order to salvage dead satellites and they're parabolic dishes, okay? Which is why I made that eccentricity joke, parabolic.
Yeah.
Okay. They want to chop off the dish, chuck the baseband section, because it's old and obsolete, but the dish should be perfect because, when you cut to the frequency, you cut to the wavelength. That's like an unmutable, future-proof kind of thing. Have you heard about this project?
No, I haven't, but what's the objective?
The idea is to salvage the dishes because the dishes inherently are perfect. They'll never become obsolete. And so then they'll move these dishes to make a future constellation. Thus, you toss out the golden boxes to burn up, but you keep your dish.
What's curious to me, however, and by the way, DARPA, as your listeners surely know, is an arm of the military that does highly speculative research that normally wouldn't get funded by typical peer-reviewed efforts. And so they're high, possibly very high return, but very high risk. And they only fund things that they know are high risk, and there's a good chance of not working, just because they know that's the only way you can do something. So it's the best place a crazy idea might ever come true. So in that, what I'm curious about is, why go through all of that with an already launched satellite when they could just make another one? I don't understand why the drama of repairing a satellite.
No need. No need at all.
I just don't understand it. There must be some other objective going on.
Let's go to St. Louis now. Hey, Scott, go ahead.
Hello, Dr. Tyson. It's a pleasure to talk to you. My question is what is your solution for light pollution? I'm an amateur astronomer, and I'm enjoying seeing the dance of Jupiter and Venus right now.
Aren't they great with the moon a few days ago? It was gorgeous.
It was gorgeous. The transit of Venus is also this year. But anyway, what is your solution for light pollution throughout the urban centers of our country that prevents us, our naked eye astronomers, from actually going out without having to travel 40 or 50 miles from our urban centers to see astronomical events like the aurora borealis that was kicked up by the flare about a month ago.
Yeah, would be one of the great casualties of light pollution. Is aurora borealis has very low surface brightness, and so you need a very dark sky to fully appreciate the dance and the colors. There's a indie film documentary that was recently released. It's called The City Dark. It's all about light pollution and the cost of light pollution, on the possible cost on our health, but the definite cost to our access to the universe if you're born and raised in the city. I was interviewed for the film, and among many people, including whole legions of amateur astronomers and others. So there are people out there who understand our call, and are trying to do something about it, or at least sensitize communities to the value of a dark sky, either near or certainly within the cities themselves. And so, when you fly in an airplane over a city, if you ever see a street light, that street light is illuminating the sky. That's why you can see it. So it's wasted photons. And so whoever's paying for that electric bill is paying to light up the sky.
That's all right.
So there are laws being introduced to have intelligently capped lights where the light only points down. And then you need less wattage to illuminate the same area. And that will help to clean up the sky. But New York City might be beyond hope, but other cities where they are in a position to control lighting ordinances, like Tucson, Arizona, which is a neighbor of the Kitt Peak National Observatory, they have the most progressive lighting laws ever. And you go there, you fly over to Tucson, you can barely see the lights that are in the streets. And so there's some hope. I think some cities are beyond reach. New York City, Chicago, possibly Houston, and definitely L.A. But there's the rest of the country that might still be able to respond to this.
Super. Neil, where do we get your book, Space Chronicles?
Oh, yeah. I think it's everywhere. Amazon's got it. If you want to sort of read a few paragraphs on it, on my website, you just Google Neil Tyson, and I think the top hit is my website. In the books section, there's a excerpt from it and a discussion, and so you can judge whether it's something that you'd be interested in.
Hey, you're invited back, Neil, anytime you want. Okay, my friend.
Well, thank you. Universe is full of mystery.
It sure is.
And you guys focus on the mysteries. That's great.
I love it, Neil. Go for it. Thank you so much, Neil deGrasse Tyson. His book, Space Chronicles, great interview. Isn't he? A lot of energy. For Dan Galante, Tom Danheiser, Lisa Lyon, Lex Lonehood, Sean Ladassour, Stephanie Smith, Ross Mitchell, George Knapp, John B. Wells, Ian Punnett, and Art Bell, I'm George Norrie, somewhere out there on Coast to Coast AM. We'll see you on our next edition. Until then, be safe, everyone.